The sun was just beginning to rise over the small town of Willow Creek, painting the streets in a pale orange glow. Inside the local police precinct, Officer Brad Whitmore adjusted his uniform, his jaw tight, his hands restless. To anyone watching, he looked calm, professional even. But beneath the surface, there was a simmering impatience, a judgmental streak he'd carried like a badge for years. At the same time, 12-year-old Maya Lewis zipped up her backpack, her long braids swaying behind her like ribbons of midnight. Her eyes, large and curious, sparkled with the morning light. Today was special. She had promised her mother she would present herself neatly at the school assembly, her hair neatly braided as always. Maya didn't know it yet, but this day would change her life forever. Maya's mother, Angela, kissed her on the forehead and reminded her, "Be careful today, baby. Stay strong." Maya nodded, not fully understanding the weight behind her mother's words. At the police station, Officer Whitmore had been assigned to community outreach for the day, a task he treated with subtle disdain. It was meant to be a school visit program, but Brad's true feelings about the kids of Willow Creek were hard to hide. He had a tendency to see trouble where there was none, to assume the worst, and to act first, think later. The school's gymnasium buzzed with students waiting for the officers to speak about law and order. Maya walked through the doors, her braids bouncing, her uniform perfectly pressed. She tried to ignore the nervous flutter in her stomach. Her friends waved at her from across the room, their laughter echoing in the cavernous space. Then it happened. Whitmore spotted her from the front of the gym. He froze for a moment, eyes narrowing. "That kid," he muttered under his breath. There was something about the braids, something he couldn't explain, but it triggered a deep, unspoken prejudice he had carried for years. Without thinking, without permission, he strode over to her. "Those braids aren't allowed," he barked, his tone cold, official. Maya's heart skipped a beat. "My braids? They're my hair," she said softly, clutching the straps of her backpack. "Rules are rules," Whitmore said, grabbing her arm with surprising strength. "We're fixing this now." Before Maya could react, he yanked her into a side room. Other students turned to watch, whispers growing into uneasy murmurs. Maya's protests were drowned out by the echoing slap of scissors cutting through her hair. Each snip felt like a betrayal, like a piece of her dignity was being ripped away. She wanted to scream, to run, but her voice caught in her throat. Tears streamed down her face as the officer cut her braids, each one falling to the floor like shards of broken trust. And then, in a moment that would haunt Whitmore forever, the school principal entered. "Brad, what in God's name are you doing?" the principal yelled. But Whitmore didn't respond. He was already recoiling from the sinking feeling in his stomach, an unease he had never known before. Meanwhile, Maya's mother, Angela, received a frantic call from the school. She dropped the phone and sprinted to the gym, her heart hammering in her chest. She arrived to find Maya. Tears streaked down her face, standing in a mess of broken braids. Her hands shook as she swept her daughter into her arms. "Why would he do this? Why?" Angela whispered, anger and fear twisting in her voice. Maya could only sob, hiding her face against her mother's chest. But the story didn't end there. Unbeknownst to Officer Whitmore, Maya's father, Terrence Lewis, had been away on a secret mission overseas. Terrence was a decorated federal investigator, a man known for his unyielding justice and an unshakable moral compass. The moment he learned of what had happened, he dropped everything. He stormed into the precinct later that evening, his presence alone silencing everyone in the room. The tension was palpable. Officers shifted nervously as Terrence's gaze fell on Whitmore. "You cut my daughter's hair?" Terrence said, his voice low, calm, but deadly. Whitmore opened his mouth, but no words came. He had no idea who he was dealing with. "This isn't just a haircut," Terrence continued, stepping closer. "This is an act of humiliation, and it will have consequences." Whitmore's heart raced. He tried to assert authority, to claim procedure and protocol, but Terrence's reputation preceded him. Every instinct told him he was in over his head. And then Terrence's phone buzzed. A message flashed across the screen. Maya's mother had captured the entire incident on her phone. The video was clear, undeniable. Whitmore's stomach sank as the evidence became impossible to ignore. Terrence's eyes bore into him, unrelenting. "You're going to regret this," Terrence said quietly, almost whispering, as if speaking louder would make it worse. And at that moment, Whitmore realized he had awakened something far larger than a mere complaint, something that would not rest until justice was served. As Terrence left with Maya, determined to set things right, Whitmore stood frozen, the weight of his actions crushing him. He had no idea what storm he had just triggered. Outside, Maya clutched her father's hand tightly. Her tears had dried, replaced by a flicker of defiance she didn't know she had. She looked up at him. "Dad, will it be okay?" she whispered. Terrence looked down, his expression both fierce and comforting. "Yes, baby, it's going to be okay. But some lessons, they have to be learned the hard way." The sun was setting now over Willow Creek, casting long shadows across the town. And as the darkness fell, a quiet storm was gathering, a storm of justice, resilience, and unbreakable truth. But neither Maya nor Whitmore could know what was coming next, and when it hit, it would change their lives forever. The night air was thick and heavy as Terrence Lewis drove through the quiet streets of Willow Creek, Maya sitting beside him. Her small hand clutched his tightly, the only tether holding her to calm. Her mind replayed the morning over and over. The scissors, the officer's cold face, the snip of each braid. "Dad," Maya whispered, her voice trembling. Why did he do that? Terrence exhaled slowly, staring straight ahead. His jaw was tight, his mind calculating. "Because some people see fear and weakness instead of strength and courage," he said. "But Maya, you need to understand something. Strength isn't in how others see you. It's in how you see yourself." Maya's eyes filled with tears again. "I felt powerless." "You weren't," Terrence replied firmly. "Not even for a second." And that's what he didn't realize. That's the mistake he made. The silence between them was heavy, filled with unspoken thoughts. Terrence had already begun planning. Whitmore's actions weren't just unprofessional. They were deliberate, a reflection of bias and arrogance that could no longer go unchecked. And the more Terrence thought about it, the more he realized this was bigger than Willow Creek. This was systemic. By the time they reached home, Angela was waiting, pacing the living room, tears still streaking her face. She looked up as they entered. "Terrence, he cut her hair," she said, voice breaking. "I've never felt so helpless in my life." "You're not helpless," Terrence said firmly, setting Maya down gently. "We're going to fix this. And it starts now." Angela's eyes widened. "Fix this? Terrence, he's an officer. What can we do?" Terrence's expression hardened. "The law doesn't protect the innocent from every injustice, but the truth does, and the truth has power. I've dealt with men like Whitmore before, and they always fall when they underestimate the person they've wronged." Maya, still trembling, looked up at her father. Are they going to hurt him?" Terrence shook his head. "No, baby. We don't fight hate with hate. We fight it with justice." The next morning, Terrence began his investigation. He started by reviewing every angle of the incident, the school surveillance footage, witness accounts, and most importantly, Angela's phone video. The footage was damning. Whitmore's actions were deliberate, aggressive, and completely unjustified. But Terrence knew this wasn't just about evidence. It was about strategy. Whitmore was connected. He had allies in the department, and he would try to twist the narrative. Terrence needed leverage, someone who could stand on the side of truth, and he knew exactly where to start. Meanwhile, Whitmore woke to a series of anonymous emails and phone calls. His anxiety spiked with every message. "You're already on thin ice," one read. Another, more threatening. "The world will see the truth soon. Prepare yourself." He tried to dismiss them, but the unease in his stomach grew. Whitmore had always operated under the assumption that his authority made him untouchable. But now he felt the first tremors of fear. At school, Maya's friends had rallied around her. They whispered words of encouragement, shared clips of the incident on social media, and stood by her side. But even as support grew, so did the weight of humiliation. Maya hated the attention, the pity, and the stares. But Terrence had a plan to turn this weakness into strength. "Tomorrow, we're to school together," Terrence told her that evening. "And we're going to make sure your voice is heard." Not just for you, but for every kid who's been treated unfairly. Maya nodded, a flicker of determination in her eyes. I want to be brave, she said softly. I don't want anyone else to feel like I did. Terrence smiled. That's my girl. Bravery isn't the absence of fear. Maya, it's standing up even when you're scared. The following day, Terrence arrived at the school with a small team of legal advisors and journalists he had quietly contacted. Whitmore was at the gym, preparing for another routine session of community outreach, unaware of what was waiting for him. When Terrence walked in, cameras rolling, Whitmore's face went pale. The officers around him shifted nervously. The moment had come to confront him publicly, to expose the injustice in front of witnesses, students, and the media. Officer Whitmore, Terrence began, his voice calm but powerful. Do you recall what happened yesterday morning? Whitmore opened his mouth, but found no words. The silence was deafening. The students' eyes were fixed on him, and Maya stepped forward, standing tall despite the lingering sting of her lost braids. You cut my hair, she said, her voice steady, carrying across the gym. You humiliated me. You thought it was just hair, but it was more than that. You tried to take my dignity. And now, everyone is going to see the truth. The gym was silent. Whitmore's arrogance crumbled in real time, his authority meaningless in the face of undeniable truth and courage. But just as Terrence prepared to press forward, a sudden alert came through his phone. Something had been discovered, a link between Whitmore and a network of officers with a history of misconduct, stretching far beyond Willow Creek. The story was bigger than anyone had imagined. Terrence's jaw tightened. Maya, this is bigger than we thought. And now, it's no longer just about your hair. It's about exposing a system that protects the wrong people. Whitmore's eyes darted around, panic rising. The calm facade he relied on for years was cracking, and Terrence knew the next move would be crucial. The night air was heavy with tension as Terrence Lewis drove through Willow Creek, his hands gripping the steering wheel with controlled force. Maya sat beside him, her small hand in his, trembling ever so slightly. Her long braids had been snipped off earlier that morning by Officer Whitmore, a man who had treated her hair like a crime scene. Each strand of hair had fallen to the floor like pieces of her dignity, leaving her shaken and humiliated. Dad. Maya's voice broke the silence, quivering with a mix of fear and confusion. Why did he do that? Terrence's jaw tightened. He kept his eyes on the road, fighting the surge of anger that threatened to spill over. Some people, he said slowly, see what's different and they think it's wrong. They think they can control it, shape it, punish it. But Maya, your hair, your braids, they were a part of who you are, and he had no right to touch them. Maya's lips quivered, but she tried to pull herself together. It felt powerless, like I couldn't do anything. You weren't powerless, Terrence said, his voice calm but firm. Not even for a second. The power wasn't in stopping him. It's in how you carry yourself after fact. That's what he didn't understand. Maya stared out the window at the passing streetlights, trying to make sense of the storm that had just swept through her life. The sense of violation, the embarrassment, it all weighed heavily on her. But beneath it, a flicker of determination was beginning to grow. By the time they reached home, Angela Lewis was pacing the living room, her face etched with worry. As soon as she saw Maya, her arms opened, drawing her daughter into a tight embrace. Oh, baby, Angela whispered, her voice trembling. I can't believe he did this. I can't believe this happened to you. Terrence set down his bag and placed a reassuring hand on Angela's shoulder. We're going to fix this, he said firmly. We won't let this go unnoticed. Angela shook her head, incredulous. Terrence, he's an officer. What can we do? We can't just walk in and accuse him. Terrence's eyes darkened, not with anger, but with resolve. We don't need to accuse him. We have evidence. Your phone recorded everything, and that footage will speak for itself. But we also need to be smart. Whitmore isn't just going to apologize. He'll fight to protect his position, and anyone who stands against him. Maya peeked from behind her mother's shoulder. Are we going to make him pay? She asked, her voice small. Terrence knelt beside her. No, baby. We're not fighting hate with hate. We're going to expose the truth. Justice isn't about revenge. It's about fairness, about making sure no one else suffers like this. The next morning, Terrence began his methodical investigation. He reviewed every detail. The surveillance footage from the school, witness accounts from teachers and students, and most importantly, Angela's video. Each frame, each sound clip, each witness statement painted a damning picture. Whitmore's actions weren't a mistake. They were deliberate, fueled by prejudice. But Terrence knew evidence alone wouldn't be enough. Whitmore had allies in the department. He had friends who could vouch for his character, manipulate reports, and twist the narrative. To truly succeed, Terrence would need leverage, witnesses, and a plan that left no room for manipulation. Meanwhile, Officer Whitmore woke to a series of anonymous messages on his phone. Each one was short, precise, and unsettling. The world will know the truth. You can't hide anymore. You made a mistake, and it's only going to get worse. Whitmore tried to dismiss them, but anxiety gnawed at him. He had built his career on authority and control. Never had anyone dared challenge him so directly, especially not a civilian, and certainly not a child's family. At school, Maya's friends had started circulating clips of the incident on social media. Some were horrified, some angry, some supportive. Maya felt a complicated mix of emotions: embarrassment, anger, and a growing sense of empowerment. She hated the attention, but she also realized that her story could protect other kids from similar humiliation. That afternoon, Terrence sat down with Maya to prepare her. "Tomorrow," he said, "we're going to school together. You'll speak. You'll tell your story. And people will hear it. This isn't just about you. It's about showing others that no one should ever feel powerless." Maya took a deep breath. "I want to be brave," she said softly. "I don't want anyone else to feel like I did." Terrence smiled, his heart swelling with pride. Bravery isn't the absence of fear. It's standing tall even when you're scared. That's what makes you strong. The following morning, Terrence arrived at Willow Creek Elementary with a small team: a civil rights lawyer, a trusted journalist, and 2 family friends who could serve as witnesses. The gymnasium buzzed with students, teachers, and a few curious parents. Officer Whitmore stood at the front, preparing for another routine session of community outreach. Unaware of the storm heading his way, Terrence stepped forward, his presence commanding. Whitmore's confident facade faltered as the room fell silent. Cameras clicked and recorded. "Officer Whitmore," Terrence began, his voice steady, deliberate, and loaded with authority. "Do you recall what happened yesterday morning?" Whitmore opened his mouth, but no words came. The silence was deafening. Maya stepped forward, her posture rigid, her gaze unwavering. "You cut my hair," she said, her voice carrying clearly. "You humiliated me in front of everyone. You thought it was just hair, but it was more than that. It was my dignity, my pride, and my identity. And now, everyone is going to see the truth." The room was silent. Whitmore's face paled, his composure cracking under the weight of exposure. The students, initially scared, began murmuring their support. Some filmed the moment with their phones. The social media clips from the previous day began to resurface, amplifying the truth. But just as Terrence prepared to press further, his phone buzzed. A notification from an investigative source lit up his screen. A deeper connection between Whitmore and a network of officers with a history of misconduct and abuse of authority. The revelations were staggering. Whitmore's actions were not isolated. They were part of a pattern that stretched beyond Willow Creek. Terrence's jaw tightened. He looked down at Maya, whose expression had shifted from fear to quiet resolve. "This," he whispered, "is bigger than any of us imagined. And now, it's no longer just about your hair. It's about exposing a system that protects the wrong people." Whitmore's eyes darted around the gym. Panic replaced arrogance. The calm control he had wielded for years evaporated. Terrence knew this was just the beginning. The exposure would shake Whitmore's world completely. Then, a subtle shift at the back of the gym caught Terrence's eye. A shadowy figure had slipped in unnoticed, raising a phone to their face and whispering, "They're moving too fast. We need to stop them." Terrence's heart sank. This wasn't just about justice anymore. It was about survival. Someone outside the law, someone with their own agenda, had taken notice. And as Maya stood tall beside her father, The weight of the fight ahead settled over them. The battle wasn't just for her dignity anymore. It was for truth, for courage, and for every child who had ever been silenced. The morning sun filtered weakly through the blinds of the Lewis family home, but the calm it promised was a lie. Terrence sat at the dining table, laptop open, paper spread across every inch of the surface. The investigation had grown far more complicated than he had anticipated. Whitmore's connections within the police department ran deeper than he had imagined. Some officers were willing to bend the rules, turn blind eyes, or manipulate reports. Maya, still raw from the incident, entered the room, her small frame quiet but resolute. She had slept poorly, haunted by memories of the scissors, but she had also dreamt of standing up, not just for herself, but for every child who had ever been humiliated or dismissed. "Dad," she said softly, "what are we going to do today?" Terrence looked at her, and for a moment, he allowed himself a smile. "We're going to take the next step. Today, the world is going to see the truth." Maya's eyes widened. "The world?" "Yes," Terrence said. "Social media, news outlets, school officials, they'll all know. Whitmore can't hide behind his badge anymore." By mid-morning, Terrence had assembled a team. The civil rights lawyer he had consulted was ready with a formal complaint. A trusted journalist had prepared to publish an exposé, documenting the events and providing context about Whitmore's history of misconduct. Every piece of evidence was in place. The school video, witness testimonies, and Maya's courageous first-hand account. At school, the atmosphere had shifted. Students whispered to each other. Teachers glanced nervously at the gym, and parents began arriving, drawn by the rumors of a confrontation. Whitmore, oblivious to the extent of the exposure, paced the gym, rehearsing how he would spin the story. He had no idea that Terrence had already contacted multiple news organizations, that social media was ready to amplify the truth, and that the legal framework was being ready to strike him where it hurt most, his credibility and career. Terrence arrived at the school with Maya, Angela, and the small team. Cameras were rolling. Smartphones were filming, and the journalists were ready to broadcast live. The tension in the gym was electric. Whitmore tried to maintain his composure, but beads of sweat dotted his forehead. The facade he had relied on for years was crumbling. Terrence stepped forward. "Officer Whitmore," he began, his voice carrying across the room like a forceful wind. "Do you remember what you did to my daughter yesterday morning?" Whitmore's throat tightened. He tried to respond, but words failed him. The gym fell silent. Every eye focused on him. Every camera capturing the moment. Maya stepped forward, standing tall, her voice steady and unwavering. "You cut my hair without my permission. You humiliated me in front of my friends, teachers, and classmates. You thought it was just a small act, but it wasn't. It was a violation. And now, everyone will know the truth." A ripple of murmurs spread across the room. Students whispered their support, some filming with their phones. Maya's courage had inspired them. Whitmore's arrogance faltered. His years of authority meant nothing in the face of undeniable truth. Terrence presented the evidence methodically. The video footage, witness statements, and documentation of Whitmore's past complaints and disciplinary records. The narrative was undeniable. Whitmore had crossed a line, and now the system he had trusted protect him was turning against him. But as Terrence continued, an unsettling presence in the gym caught his eye. The shadowy figure he had noticed in Part 2 had returned. They were watching, unnoticed, but their gaze was deliberate, calculating. Terrence felt a cold shiver run down his spine. Whoever this was, they weren't just an observer. They were waiting, plotting. Meanwhile, Whitmore's panic grew. His attempts to maintain authority faltered as the room shifted against him. He could feel the power slipping from his hands, the safety net of his badge unraveling before his eyes. Then, an unexpected ally emerged. One of Whitmore's colleagues, an officer who had long been uncomfortable with Whitmore's behavior, stepped forward. "Enough," the officer said firmly. "This has gone too far. We can't allow this to continue." Whitmore's face turned red with anger and disbelief. He tried to assert control, but it was too late. The system was no longer supporting him. Terrence's meticulous preparation had ensured that every move Whitmore could make to manipulate the narrative had already been anticipated. Maya looked around at the faces in the gym, her classmates, teachers, and even the media, she realized something powerful. Her voice, her courage, and her truth were stronger than the fear Whitmore had tried to instill in her. Terrence leaned down, speaking quietly but firmly. "Maya, remember this moment. Remember that standing up for yourself is never wrong. You have the power to change things." But just as a sense of victory began to settle, Terrence's phone vibrated. He glanced at the screen and froze. It was an encrypted message from an unknown source. "You've exposed him, but not everyone wants the truth to come out. Be careful. They're watching." The shadowy figure at the back of the gym made a subtle movement, disappearing as quickly as they had appeared. Terrence's mind raced. Whitmore was only the beginning. Someone, somewhere, had their own agenda, and it wasn't just about one officer. It was about protecting a network of corruption. Whitmore's eyes darted nervously. The confidence he had displayed before was gone, replaced by fear and desperation. He glanced at the crowd, realizing that for the first time, he was powerless. Terrence addressed the room, his voice calm but commanding. "This isn't just about one person's actions. It's about accountability. It's about standing up for what's right, even when it's hard. And it starts with us here today." The students erupted in quiet applause, a wave of support washing over Maya. She felt a surge of pride and empowerment, knowing that the moment she had feared most had become a turning point. Not just for her, but for everyone watching. But the threat lingered. The shadowy figure, the mysterious messages, and the realization that Whitmore was connected to a larger web of corruption meant that the fight was far from over. The sound of the front door slamming shut echoed through the Lewis household, making Maya jump. Terrence's eyes snapped to the figure in the dark hoodie, heart instantly tightening. The man dropped a thick folder onto the floor, the paper spilling like a waterfall of secrets. "You've stirred a hornet's nest," the stranger whispered. His voice was low, almost a growl. "This is bigger than you think." Terrence's hands tightened into fists. "Who are you?" he demanded, stepping forward protectively. The man didn't answer. Instead, he picked up a handful of documents from the floor and handed them to Terrence. They were files, photographs, and reports, evidence of misconduct far beyond what Terrence had imagined. Officers, politicians, even school officials were implicated in covering up crimes, abusing authority, and silencing anyone who dared speak the truth. Maya stared at the papers in disbelief. "Dad, this is huge." Terrence scanned the documents quickly. His jaw tightened with every name he read. Whitmore was just a small piece of a much larger, more dangerous network. The realization hit him hard. Exposing one man was nothing if the system itself remained corrupt. "We need a plan," Terrence said, his mind already racing. "We can't just go public yet. If we do, we'll trigger retaliation before we even have a chance to protect ourselves and the evidence." Angela nodded, worry etched deep into her features. "Terrence, are we safe? What if they come after us?" Terrence knelt beside Maya, gripping her small hands. "We'll be safe. I promise. But safety doesn't mean doing nothing. It means being smart, strategic, and ready for anything. Maya, we're not just fighting for your dignity anymore. We're fighting for the truth." Maya swallowed hard. "I want to help." Terrence smiled, proud despite the danger surrounding them. "You already are helping. Your courage is what makes this possible. And now we move forward carefully, but we move forward." The next day, Terrence and his legal team began organizing the evidence, cross-referencing documents, and preparing for a controlled release that would maximize impact while minimizing risk. They reached out to trusted journalists and civil rights organizations, ensuring that the story would reach the public without being diluted or suppressed. Meanwhile, Whitmore was spiraling. The public exposure of his actions, combined with the growing pressure of Terrence's investigation, left him desperate. He contacted his network, trying to find a way to silence the Lewis family, to discredit Maya, and to erase the video footage that had already gone viral. But Whitmore underestimated one thing: the resolve of Terrence and Maya. The father-daughter duo was meticulous, strategic, and fearless. Every move Whitmore tried to make was anticipated. Every attempt to intimidate or manipulate was neutralized by evidence, witnesses, and the growing support of the community. In school, Maya became a quiet symbol of courage. Students rallied around her. Teachers expressed support, and the story began trending online. Comments flooded in from people inspired by her bravery. The narrative had shifted. She was no longer just a victim. She was a young girl standing against injustice, and the world was watching. But danger lurked closer than they realized. One evening, as Terrence reviewed the files with a journalist and lawyer in his study, a shadow appeared outside the window. Terrence's heart skipped a beat. He grabbed a flashlight and shined it toward the darkness, but it was gone. The envelope from earlier had not been an isolated threat. Someone was monitoring them, and the implication was clear. The hornet's nest was stirring, and they were not going to let Terrence and Maya dismantle their network without resistance. That night, Maya lay in bed, restless. "Dad, what if they come for us?" she asked quietly, fear trembling in her voice. Terrence sat beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Maya, courage isn't the absence of fear. Courage is facing it. We will protect ourselves, and we will protect the truth. And remember, truth has a way of shining through, no matter how dark it gets." The following day, Terrence executed the next phase of his plan. He arranged for a live interview with a major news network, where he would present the evidence of Whitmore's misconduct and the wider corruption in the department. Security measures were tight. Every move was coordinated, every document verified. This was the moment where public exposure would force accountability, and the community would have to confront the rot within its own system. Whitmore, realizing the gravity of the situation, panicked. He called in favors, attempted to manipulate school officials, and tried to halt the broadcast, but it was too late. The network had everything ready: video evidence, testimonies, documents, and a live feed of Terrence's statement. As the camera rolled, Terrence spoke with calm authority. "This is not just about one officer. This is about a system that has allowed misconduct, abuse, and injustice to flourish. My daughter was a victim, but she is also a symbol. And today, the truth will be seen. The world will know. Accountability starts now." The broadcast went live. Across Willow Creek, across the state, and across social media platforms. People watched. The evidence was undeniable. Whitmore's attempt to manipulate and intimidate were exposed. For the first time, the system that had protected him was turning against him. But as Terrence concluded, a chilling thought crossed his mind. The shadowy figure they had seen before, someone connected to Whitmore's network, had not been neutralized. And now, with the broadcast live and the evidence public, the stakes were higher than ever. The night was suffocatingly silent. The Lewis home, once a sanctuary, now felt fragile under the weight of imminent danger. Terrence's instincts had been screaming for hours, but the adrenaline now coursed through his veins in sharp, precise waves. Maya lay in her bed, her eyes wide, listening to every creak, every whisper of wind. Terrence whispered to Angela, "Stay calm. Stay inside. Don't confront anyone. I'll handle this." His voice was steady, but his mind was racing, calculating, anticipating, preparing. The figure outside had been bold. Whoever it was had been watching them for days, learning their patterns, waiting for a moment of weakness. Terrence grabbed a flashlight and quietly slipped into the shadows outside. The cold night air cut through him, but his focus was unwavering. The figure was there, moving with careful precision, circling the house as if looking for a way in. Terrence followed silently, his steps measured, ready. Suddenly, the figure darted toward the side door, attempting to breach the perimeter. Terrence reacted instantly. "Stop!" he shouted, his voice booming through the night. The figure froze, but only for a second. Terrence lunged, tackling them to the ground. A struggle ensued. The stranger was surprisingly strong and agile, but Terrence's experience in high-stakes confrontations gave him the edge. With a precise maneuver, he pinned the figure down, securing the person until Angela, finally finding courage, grabbed the phone and called the police. The stranger struggled, but Terrence had enough presence of mind to secure them safely. When the police arrived, they were shocked to find that the figure was a known associate of Whitmore, someone deeply embedded in a network of officers and officials who had long protected Whitmore's misconduct. Inside, Maya sat on the stairs, trembling but resolute. "Dad, that was scary," she whispered, clutching his hand. Terrence knelt beside her. "Yes, baby, It was scary. But courage doesn't mean never being afraid. It means acting even when you are. You were brave today, and that's what counts. The next day, Terrence and his legal team prepared for the ultimate phase of their strategy, exposing the entire network publicly and ensuring that Whitmore faced real accountability. They compiled every piece of evidence, every document, every testimony into a comprehensive dossier. It was irrefutable. Whitmore, realizing the walls were closing in, panicked. He contacted every ally, tried to discredit the Lewis family, and even attempted to bribe key witnesses. But Terrence's preparation had been meticulous. Every contingency had been planned, every move anticipated. Whitmore was trapped. Terrence appeared at a press conference with Maya and Angela by his side. The media had gathered in record numbers, and live feeds were broadcasting across the country. Cameras flashed as Terrence began speaking. "This isn't just about my daughter's haircut," he said, his voice calm and unwavering. "It's about exposing a system that has protected misconduct, harassment, and abuse. My daughter's courage has sparked a movement for accountability, fairness, and justice. Whitmore and his network will no longer operate in the shadows." Maya stepped forward, her voice strong despite the lingering fear from the night before. "You thought you could humiliate me and silence me," she said, looking directly into the cameras. "But I'm not afraid, and no one should ever be afraid to stand up for themselves." The crowd erupted in applause. Social media exploded with support, sharing clips of Maya's bravery and Terrence's expose. The tide had turned. Whitmore was facing immediate suspension, an internal investigation, and the beginnings of a criminal probe. But the fight wasn't over. Whitmore's network was large, and some members were still at large, attempting to cover their tracks and protect him. Terrence knew the battle was only halfway won. That night, as the Lewis family celebrated their small but significant victory, Terrence received an encrypted message on his phone. His stomach sank. The sender was anonymous, but the threat was clear. "You won the battle, but the war isn't over. We're watching, and when the time is right, the consequences will come." Maya, sensing her father's tension, asked quietly, "Dad, are we safe now?" Terrence hugged her tightly. "We're safer tonight, and tomorrow we'll be ready for whatever comes next. The truth is on our side, Maya. That gives us strength." And yet, even in the warmth of their home, a shadow lingered, reminding them that real courage was not just about surviving the night, but about preparing for the storm still ahead. The night was thick with tension. The black SUV that had been lurking outside the Lewis home moved like a shadow across the quiet streets of Willow Creek. Inside, the figures reviewed footage of Terrence and Maya at the press conference, their expressions hard, calculating. One voice finally broke the silence. "They've gone public, but that won't save them. Make the call. It's time to end this once and for all." Terrence had anticipated retaliation. He had prepared contingencies, coordinated with law enforcement allies, and ensured that Maya, Angela, and he were protected. The house was secure, alarms activated, and cameras recording every angle. For the first time, the predators attempting to silence them realized that their prey was ready. Maya watched from the stairs, clutching a blanket around her shoulders. "Dad, are they really coming?" Terrence knelt beside her. "Maybe, but we've done everything right." Courage isn't about never facing danger. It's about standing firm in the face of it. Hours later, a series of police lights illuminated the driveway. Officers stormed the area, surrounding the SUV. The intruders, realizing they had been outmaneuvered, attempted to flee. But Terrence's allies were waiting. Arrests were made, evidence seized, and for the first time, the shadowy network that had long protected Whitmore was exposed in its entirety. Whitmore himself was cornered. Public pressure, combined with undeniable evidence and growing community outrage, left him with no room to maneuver. His arrogance crumbled. He attempted to argue, to deflect, but the weight of truth and accountability crushed him. The media captured every moment. The fall of the man who had once wielded power like a weapon. Terrence stepped forward at the courthouse, Maya by his side. Cameras from every network were rolling. "This isn't just my daughter's story," he said, his voice calm, steady, and commanding. It's the story of countless children, families, and communities that have suffered because the system allowed injustice to thrive. But today, we prove that courage, truth, and resilience can overcome fear and oppression. Justice is not a privilege. It's a right. And when we stand together, the truth will always prevail. Maya stepped forward, small but unshakable. "I was scared yesterday," she said, "but I learned something important. When you stand up for what's right, you're never really alone. People see you, people support you, and you can make a difference." Her words reverberated across the courtroom, across the city, across the nation. Social media lit up with messages of hope, bravery, and inspiration. Maya's courage had become a beacon. In the weeks that followed, Whitmore faced formal charges for abuse of authority, harassment, and misconduct. Several officers connected to the network were removed from their positions, investigated, and in some cases prosecuted. Policies in Willow Creek were rewritten to protect students, prevent abuse, and ensure accountability. Terrence, Angela, and Maya returned to their lives, forever changed but stronger. Maya's braids had grown back, more beautiful than ever, a symbol of resilience. And she carried herself with a newfound confidence, knowing she'd face fear, humiliation, and injustice, and emerge victorious. One evening, Maya and Terrence sat on the porch, watching the sunset over Willow Creek. Maya rested her head against her father's shoulder. "Dad," she whispered, "do you think it will ever happen again?" Terrence wrapped an arm around her. "There will always be challenges, Maya. But courage, truth, and standing up for what's right, that's something no one can take from you. Remember this moment, and let it guide you for the rest of your life." Maya smiled, a quiet, determined smile that reflected a strength far beyond her years. "I will, Dad. I promise." In the distance, the town glowed softly in the evening light. Willow Creek had faced injustice, but it had also witnessed courage. And as long as people like Maya and Terrence stood for what was right, hope would always shine brighter than fear. The battle had been hard, the stakes immense, but justice had triumphed. The scars of yesterday became the strength of tomorrow, and the story of a little girl with stolen braids became a legend of resilience, inspiration, and truth. Final scene. Maya braided her hair again, this time herself, carefully, lovingly, as her mother watched with pride. Terrence looked on, smiling, knowing that this small act, this reclaiming of her identity, was a symbol of victory far greater than any court ruling. It was a victory of courage, the victory of justice, and the triumph of TR,